Hey, have you ever really stopped to think about why your classes were set up the way they were? You know, why math class might have been all about drills and repetition, but English was all about group discussions and sharing your thoughts? Well, believe it or not, the design of our schools is anything but accidental. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore the powerful and often invisible psychological theories that have shaped pretty much every classroom you've ever set foot in.
It really all boils down to this one big question. Why the drills in one class and the big open-ended projects in another? And you know what? The answer isn't just random. It's actually rooted in this century-long debate about the most fundamental question there is. How do we actually learn?
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to trace the psychological roots of modern education through three major schools of thought. We'll kick things off with behaviorism, which basically sees learning as a set of observable actions. Then, we're going to dive right into the mind itself with cognitivism. After that, we'll look at the whole student, emotions and all, with humanism. And finally, we'll see how all these big ideas come together in the classroom today.
All right, our journey begins with behaviorism. See, back in the early 20th century, psychologists really wanted to make the study of learning a hard science. So, what was their solution? Well, they decided to just ignore the messy, unobservable world of thoughts and feelings and focus only on what you can see and measure, behavior.
To the behaviorists, the learner was kind of like a machine. You put in an input, what they called a stimulus, and you get an output, a response. Just think about getting a gold star for a correct answer. That is pure behaviorism in action. It's a positive consequence that's specifically designed to make you repeat that behavior. Now, this whole school of thought was really built on the work of Edward Thorndike and his theory of connectionism. He argued that learning, at its core, is all about building habits by creating these direct links, or connections, between what we experience and how we react. His work was a huge influence on curriculum pioneers like Ralph Tyler and Hilda Taba, who took these ideas and used them to create clear, step-by-step learning goals. Thorndike broke this down with his laws of exercise. The law of use is super simple. Practice makes perfect, right? The more you do something in response to a cue, the stronger that connection gets. And on the flip side, the law of disuse is basically the classic use it or lose it principle. If you stop responding, that connection starts to fade away. So, building on that foundation, you get B.F. Skinner, who made this really critical distinction. He split behavior into two types. First, there's respondent behavior. That's the automatic stuff, like yanking your hand away from a hot stove. But then there's operant behavior, which are the voluntary actions we choose to take, like raising your hand in class to answer a question. And Skinner came up with a famous model for shaping that operant behavior, which people often call the ABC model. You've got an antecedent, that's the cue, like a teacher asking a question. Then comes the behavior itself, you raising your hand. And finally, the consequence, the teacher praising you. Now, if that consequence is positive, if it's reinforcing, you're way more likely to do it again.
This really shows a fundamental shift in thinking. In classical conditioning, like with Pavlov's famous dogs, the learner is totally passive. They're just reacting. But in Skinner's operant conditioning, the learner is an active participant. Their own actions are what shape their future learning, all based on the consequences that follow.
And honestly, you can see the legacy of behaviorism everywhere in schools today. I mean, anytime you see direct instruction, step-by-step skill building, practice drills, or any kind of system with rewards and immediate feedback, what you're really seeing is the direct application of these behaviorist principles. But, of course, not everyone was happy with this idea of the learner as just a bundle of responses. A whole new wave of thinkers came along who wanted to know what was happening inside the mind. This was the cognitive revolution, and its goal was to crack open that black box that behaviorism had sealed shut. The new metaphor for the mind was a computer. Suddenly, the learner wasn't just reacting, they were an active information processor. They were organizing knowledge, storing memories, and running problem-solving programs in their head. You know that aha moment when a concept just suddenly clicks and makes sense? That's exactly the kind of internal processing these cognitivists were obsessed with. And one of the earliest pioneers here was Maria Montessori. I mean, decades before the cognitive revolution really took off, she was arguing that learning wasn't just about motor responses. She focused on sensory inputs, like looking and listening, and was totally convinced that how we teach must be matched to a child's natural stage of development. But the real giant of this field was Jean Piaget. He suggested that we build our understanding of the world through two key processes:
So first, when we run into something new, we try to fit it into the mental models we already have. That's assimilation. But what happens when it doesn't fit? Well, we're forced to change our way of thinking to accommodate the new information. And this constant cycle is how we learn.
This timeline really shows the incredible evolution of cognitive thought. Piaget's stage theory influenced a whole generation of thinkers, from Lawrence Kohlberg's work on moral development to curriculum designers like Jerome Bruner. Bruner famously argued that you could teach any subject to any child at any stage, as long as you presented it in the right way for them.
Now, Lev Vygotsky's idea of the ZPD was a total game changer. He argued that the most powerful learning happens in this social space. You know, that sweet spot between what a student can do all by themselves and what they can achieve with a little guidance from a teacher or even a classmate. It totally reframed learning as a fundamentally collaborative social act.
And the impact on curriculum is just immense. It's the reason classrooms now focus so much on problem solving, why teachers are always asking you to link new ideas to what you already know, and why there's this huge emphasis on teaching students how to think and learn for themselves.
But even after exploring the mind's inner workings, some people felt that something crucial was still missing. This led to what's often called the third force in psychology, humanism. And it argued that to really understand learning, you can't just look at behavior or cognition. You have to look at the whole person, their emotions, their motivations, their needs, everything.
I think a really powerful way to think about the humanistic view is to picture the learner as a plant. A plant has this innate drive to grow, right? But it can only reach its full potential if the conditions are right. It needs a safe, supportive, and encouraging environment. For humanists, the emotional climate of a classroom is every bit as important as the academic content.
And really, the ultimate goal of a humanistic curriculum is something called self-actualization, helping every single student reach their fullest unique potential. But as Abraham Maslow's famous hierarchy shows, that just can't happen if basic needs aren't met. Thinkers like Carl Rogers pushed for a therapeutic approach where teachers create a safe space for growth. The bottom line is, a student who feels unsafe or insecure simply cannot focus on learning. It's just not possible.
This quote from A.S. Neill, who founded the radical Summerhill School, just captures the absolute heart of the humanistic philosophy. It's this fundamental belief in the innate goodness and potential of every single learner. It's the idea that an educator's job is to nurture that potential, which is really the foundation for developing things like social and emotional intelligence. So looking at this, we can really see the whole journey we've been on. We've moved from the behaviorist view of the learner as a passive respondent to the cognitivist view of an active processor, and finally to the humanist view of a whole person with real emotional needs. Each one of these perspectives gives us a totally different lens for how to design a curriculum, from direct instruction all the way to self-directed learning. And this all brings us to one last really critical question. We've just explored a bunch of theories from the 20th century, but what about right now? What about the 21st century? In a world of artificial intelligence and just endless information, this debate over whether we should be reinforcing correct behaviors or building better thinking skills or nurturing the whole person, well, it's more relevant now than ever before. The debate over how we learn is far from over, and the answers we come up with will absolutely shape the future of our world. The works cited here are what form the foundation for our discussion today, in case you want to dive in deeper. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. We really hope it gave you a new way to see the world of education.